research I do with mathematics and children's literature. And specifically, I'm presenting today a paper that I presented in the summertime in Thailand, which was focusing on a particular metric or an instrument that I had developed that measures, for lack of a better word, the quality of literature that teachers use in the classroom to teach mathematics. Let me get this to go forward. How am I getting this to go forward? I did that. Oh, I'm going to have to touch the screen.
No. Sorry.
I did. Oh, okay.
Yeah, give it a little.
Pushing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
There you go.
This is annoying. I have my glasses on. So, what I'm going to be doing is just giving a brief context about the research that forms the foundation for the instrument. I'm going to then introduce to the actual instrument and the criteria that I use to evaluate the children's books. And then we're going to do some research into practice. So I have some children's books here. Haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do this for electronic versions, but we'll give it a try. And we're going to look at the tool and the instrument that I'm presenting, and we'll look at a few books and see the connection on, would you use this particular book in your classroom? Why might you use it? What good qualities does it have? Is it still usable even though it doesn't have all of the criteria on the list? And then I wanted to just do a quick introduction to a website that I have that focuses on just using children's literature to teach mathematics, so that you have the website address and you can visit it and download lessons or populate it with lessons that you might have. And then we'll end off with some questions, comments, suggestions on even you don't like this part of the tool, I'm open to changing it before it gets into a journal publication. So the idea of integrating children's literature in mathematics, it's not new. It's been around for many, many years. And the initial curriculum standards or the evaluation standards from the states had said introducing literature and integrating it with mathematics is really important. And that was done in 1989. And it was around before then. So this is not new. But getting it out there and having people do a good job of the integration is something we're still working on 25 years later. So the research in general shows that children's literature can actually provide a really good real-world context for exploring mathematics. Keeping in mind I'm focusing on K to 8, but you can use it in high school as well. But my research is K to 8. The one I'm doing today is just very, early counting, JK, SK levels. But it does provide a real-world context. It nurtures a more positive disposition towards mathematics, and that's often because in elementary school, the kids might be not comfortable with the math. So if we're starting off with a story, they like stories. So we can start off with something that's more comfortable, and then there's sometimes more engagement. And then the research also shows, which is important for math, is that if we're using one way of encouraging problem solving, reasoning, and communication is to use a children's book. It's one way that you might want to explore that. And the research over the last 20 years shows this. If you want all that research, you'll see it on, I gave a paper, my actual conference paper. I'm assuming it's uploaded somewhere here, so people can access it, the paper. Does anybody know? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. If you don't, you can always send me an email. So right now, the resources that are out for teaching mathematics and literature, most of the resources that are available for teachers and the research that's been done in journals or conference proceedings, most of it focuses on how do you use the children's books versus how do you assess the quality of the books you're using. So that's the problem. So a lot of the books that are out there and people are using may not be the greatest book, or the books that the research is done, the journal articles that are published, what they're doing is showing you a really good book and saying, see how engaging this was with the students. Do you see what they learned? But they started with a good book with the underlying assumption that the reader knows it's a good book. So there's not a whole lot out there that builds an instrument that shows this is what a good book looks like. So what I started to do is develop an instrument, and it started about 13 years ago when I started my career in a faculty of education. And so what I started off with as a foundation was the Ontario Mathematics curriculum. So I know that when I'm thinking about this instrument and the components of it, I need to think about the context. So what's required in Ontario for content knowledge. And then the other component of the research that I focused on was the conceptual development of early number sense. So how do kids learn to count? And then beyond just counting, what does it mean to be numerate? What does it mean to understand quantity? And there's a developmental continuum for those concepts on usually a child learns this and then they learn this. So, and then there's sort of overlap and they go a bit back and forth and it's a little messy. But at the end of the day, there's particular counting principles and particular ideas that we want our children to learn before they can move on and start to do more complex numeracy. I'm just talking numeracy here. So they're trying to learn how to do, for example, one-to-one correspondence. So they know when they touch an object and they label it with a number that that's 1, and the next object they touch and that's a 2, as opposed to our little children often go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and there's 3 things on the table. So when I'm looking at the children's literature, I'm making sure that there's some sort of scaffolding within those books that help students learn at least part of that collection of what early number sense looks like. And then the other research I founded on was just what are good instructional strategies when you're engaging kids in that exploration. Because when you're engaging a 4 and 5-year-old, it looks very different than how you might engage an 8 or 9-year-old. So what instructional strategies work? And then I looked at, there are a few previously developed instruments. I'm sorry, I'm in the way. You can't see that. There are some previously developed instruments that I used as a foundation. I've given you, in the actual article that's downloaded that I wrote, it gives you the full bibliography if you want to research some of those instruments. The instruments weren't strong enough, though, I found. They were either too long and too detailed for a teacher to use them and use them quickly. Because for me, my research and practice need to be aligned. And if it wasn't a low inference tool that teachers could read a book and in 5 minutes go, yeah, and I'm done, it wasn't useful. In my mind, it wasn't useful. If a teacher's not going to use it, I'm not going to do the research. So I know based on my experiences as a teacher and people I work with that if it's not going to be quick, they're not going to use it. So that was my goal. And that some of the other research that I looked at for the instruments were the language-based. So I have research on what does good literacy look like. There's some instruments out there about what good literacy looks like. And then I looked at some about what does good math look like, and then tried to blend the two of them together. So there's a couple that are out there that are decent that I wanted to start with and just build on because I don't think they included certain components I thought were important. So what I have, and I'll show you the instrument shortly in the next slide, is essentially there's 13 prompts on the instrument divided into 3 different categories. And those 3 categories emerge from the research. So what are the important parts to look at when you're looking at a kid's book? So there's a cluster of criteria that are explicit to early counting. So does it do these developmental, does it address some of these developmental phases or the actual content, the math content? And then we have to look at the illustrations. So there's another group of research criteria that say very clearly that in order for a child to count, they need to see the pictures in a certain way. So I included that criteria, and I'll show you what those include. And then it's just, there's a general appeal. I call it general appeal, but it's really the literacy research that comes up on what is a good children's book, how should it be engaging, what are things you want to think about from a language arts perspective. You probably cannot see that. Okay, I'm just going to take a peek forward. Okay, I'm going to go back. That's the actual instrument. It's actually uploaded as well, so you can get a copy of it. In a couple of slides, I'm going to show you a much bigger version of it so you can see it. Maybe I can do that first. I'm going to skip ahead. Can you see that any better? It's pretty kind of blurry. Sort of. Okay. So the instrument, the first picture I showed you is the actual tool. So it's a Likert scale, and you score them on a rating of agree to disagree, strongly disagree, that sort of thing. You do not need to use it as a numerical evaluation tool. So I originally started off with it being a Likert scale because it needs to have a number. And you need a score at the end, and if the score is above a sign, blah, 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 you use it. If it scores below, you don't use it. Then I presented it at a couple of conferences, and the language arts people are like, what are you doing? You need to be more open and flexible. I'm like, no, it has to be a number. So anyway, I'm oscillating back and forth because the last time I presented it, it was just a checklist, and it was a reflective checklist of I agree, I disagree. Then there was a bunch of mathies in the room going, it needs to be a Likert. You need to have a score. Okay, however you want to use this, you decide. I'm just giving you the criteria. And whatever the score is, you decide if that is meaningful in any way, shape, or form to how you want to use it. But the idea is I just want teachers to be more critical about the books they're picking and stop picking Dora the Explorer. And so when we start to look critically at books, I'm just saying look at these 13 criteria when you read a children's book and decide if it meets enough of the criteria to be of value to use. Or if it doesn't meet a whole lot of the criteria and you still think your kids are going to like it, then you decide. Because there'll be books that we'll look at, and I hate them because they are so bad as far as the math teaching perspective, but those kids really like Dora the Explorer, or they really like the chanting way that the book is presented. So at the end of the day, it really is, can the book engage your students? And if it doesn't engage them, it doesn't matter how many of the criteria it meets. You don't use it. So from a numeracy perspective, there are the 5 criteria that you need to look for when you're looking at a counting book. And some of this is like the most basic of the criteria, because we can't go into looking at hundreds and larger numbers, because I'm talking very early counting, JKSK, preschool. So right now, most counting books you look at are just to 10. So I thought, okay, let's start with that. So the book is better if it goes beyond counting 1 to 10. So a lot of the books extend past 10. That's a really good thing. You want them to explore counting past groups of 10. And then you want them to look at multiple representations of a number. Not just, there's a big 2 on the page. So when you're reading the book, does it show multiple representations of the quantity 2? Is there a picture of 2 dots on the page? Is the word written as TWO? Not TOO. And is there the number, the symbol 2? So what you're looking for is many multiple representations of a number. Research also shows that's important. You also want to include opportunities to count forward and backwards. Most books are just, they count forward 1 to 10, they stop at 10. Not many go backwards. Or they count up and they count down. They can be adopted as well. Any counting book can be easily adopted so that if the child's only counting to 1, 2, 3, they only have to look at like this particular picture. So can you change it so that the children can engage with it at multiple different levels? Some of that's based on the activity that you decide to do with the book. The really hard one is 0. Is there 0 in there at all? Is it 0 as a representation of nullness of a set? So there's nothing left? So I'd even take that at some point, because there's very few books that actually include 0. Or is there 0 there as a multiplier? So multiples of 10, 100. You want those in there. Really tough to find a book that includes any representation of zero. And then we go into how the books are illustrated, which is really important, which you may not think is important. But for a child to learn, when they learn to count and to do one-to-one correspondence, they actually have to see the whole object. So if it's partly hidden, you're making an assumption that they know that even though half of it's there, they know that it is a whole. You can't do that. You might be able to do that at a certain phase, but developmentally, unless a child sees the whole object, the early counting don't know that the whole object's there. So ideally, you don't want anything obstructed. You want to see each individual object fully. And you don't want them to be like mushed together and all messy, because that's really hard for kids to tag. They can't count, they lose track of what they're counting on the page. And you don't want them, as much as you like things to like, where's Waldo? That's a really bad thing. You're not trying to teach children to find an object camouflaged. You want to teach them to count. So things shouldn't blend into the background. And say goodnight. Watch them all carefully. Look, they are blinking so slowly in our jar. Now we need to move to the math, away from the math and into the morality. The moral part of the story. Open the jar, for it's much more fun watching them fly away one by one. Fly out the window and flash goodbye. Fly away, firefly. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dash away, flash away, none. Now there are none. Good. Don't know how well you could see that on the picture book. Okay. So if you start to look at some of those characters, sorry, bad habit. The book explores counting beyond 1 to 10. Beyond. The book has multiple representations of quantity. Pictures, words, illustrations. So have more than one of those. So it does words, and the number says now there are 2, and you can see the 2. And the picture, right. No numbers, which can be problematic. And then does it include opportunities to count forward and backwards? Can it be adapted for multiple abilities? And this one's a hard one for folks who aren't elementary teachers. So my assumption would be when I would be reading this book, I'd just read it once through, and then my students would have some sort of manipulative where they would be moving the fireflies into their jars, physically moving them. So when you think about the adaptations, it's you as an instructional strategy. How are you going to engage all the kids? So some of the kids may not need the manipulative to do that in count backs, but some might. Are they crowded or partially illustrated? Are they clearly distinguished from backgrounds, the objects? Are they put in groups or sets that encourage counting in groups and sets, or encourage addition, subtraction? Those are the sort of mathy-related ones, and then the general ones at the bottom are, does it invite some problem-solving communication? Can you integrate it into real-life applications or another subject area? Do you want to reread it? Is there any wow factor to the book? Is there any stereotypes? Is it inclusive? Is there any gender biases? So there's a little boy and a little girl, but you can't really see them. And does it engage the readers? So if you're reading with the kids, do they want to read it again? Those sorts of things. So when you're looking at the books, you have to look at those components in general and make a decision based on, I think it's good. I want to read it again. I think my kids would. I think it does meet a lot of that criteria. I'm going to use it. Somebody else may look at it and go, no, I don't think it met enough of the criteria, or even I just thought about the criteria and I still don't really want to use it. I don't much like the book. But it's still just, the criteria list is meant to get you thinking. It's thinking about what are the good books that you use. So just before we're going to run out of time, here's a classic one. Can you read this one? You know, this one, they have 20 versions of it. Let me fast forward it for you. There must be, yes, this book has 20 books in the series. There's 5 little monkeys jumping on a bed and 5 little monkeys doing something else, and they're doing bunches of stuff. Somebody's made a lot of money on taking these 5 little monkeys, rereading the same story in a different setting. And parents keep on buying them. And now there's an app out for it. Can't be calm, I'll be nice. Now there's an app out that helps kids, so when you get to the verbs like jumping, it jumps out at you on the screen. You can get it on iTunes. And lots of teachers use it because it engages the kids. Because it's rhyming, because the kids like it. Mathematically, I think it's horrendous. But the book, the instrument is not meant for me to tell you how to use the book. It's simply meant for you to think about, is it a quality book you want to use? Even if it's not a quality book, you still like it and you want to use it. So this particular one, it's that same chain. 5 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One falls off and bumps his head. That idea. And when you start to look at the pictures of the monkeys, it meets actually quite a bit of the criteria where they're not, let me see, where you can actually see the monkeys and they're actually in little groups, like there's a couple on the chair, a couple on the floor. And in many ways, it's quite a good book as far as the criteria and the illustrations are concerned. Problem is, it only does 5. That's all it does. So beyond about 3, this book's pretty not too helpful because you're only exploring numbers up to 5. And you're counting them backwards, but it's very, very limited audience. If you like the book and engage your kids, awesome, but not great from a math perspective. But there's plenty of other books that are out there that meet the criteria and don't meet the criteria. But the problem is teachers don't know. I'm going to skip this one. I don't have time. Oops. That's where I wanted to go. So there's books out there, and I've gone to the trouble to save you some time, and I have a website called Words to Numbers, and it lists, ooh, where's my mouse gone? Oh. There we go. So the website is, if you just Google Words to Numbers, like the number 2, it'll come up, which apparently is a good thing. If you Google my thing, my Math for Teachers comes up too. I'm very excited. So what I have in this, is this what everybody's seeing? Is that one picture of the website? Okay. On the website, if you click the Start button, you'll be brought into a matrix, and the matrix is divided by subject. So there's a matrix, and on the matrix is a subject grade level across one side and the strands on the other side, and there's books listed there. So you can go on, find, and the books are all related to a lesson. So my pre-service teachers and some in-service teachers created lessons based on books. And you can go onto the website, click on the particular subject and grade level you're looking for, and you'll find a lesson PDF ready to go with activities and such for you to use. You'll also find on the website, near the top, it's got my book lists. So most of the librarians I speak to are most interested in the book lists. So you can connect to a list. One of the lists is my top picks. There's about 100 books there. They're all listed in a PDF document that is by author, by grade level, by strand, and topic. So it saves you a bunch of work. Then the other list is called my works in progress, and there's about 1,000 books on it. And they're not rated, though. You want to work with me on starting to rate all those 1,000 books? That'd be awesome using the instrument. But they're just a whole huge collection. So hopefully you'll go to the website, take a look, think about using the kids' literature more critically, and then start to build that collection in your classrooms. And if you're working with the DEd students, trying to think about what are the books you're using and how could you integrate literature into your math classes. Oh gosh, yeah, please do. And if you have lessons that you've created, submit them. There is a lesson plan template that makes it consistent, but please submit them. And then I'm a little behind, and I have about 100 or maybe 50 I haven't uploaded. I'm having some problems with the server, but they're more and more being added. I still have to put the instrument up. It's not up yet. So then people can evaluate the books as well. But yes, please share widely and put the list out there. And it looks like I'm out of time, so there's no time for questions. But if you want to chat after, I could chat or send me an email. And I'm happy to chat with people after or via email. Don't know where it's gone. I can't get it.